I'd also like to thank, before I close out, all the agencies that supported this report. This could not have been done without the leadership of the State Department of Education, Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services, the Department of Labor, the Department of Children and Families, and many others who contributed to this work, including the Connecticut Coalition to End Homelessness, who houses the Connecticut Homeless Response System. At the time the report was authored and the data was requested, Judicial and the Department of Correction were not part of P20WIN. We're really excited to see that that's not the case anymore. So future reports will have a further and a more in-depth look into who these young people are, what their needs are, and the crossover that may be happening between departments and agencies. We're happy to answer any questions about the data, about the findings. We have some advisory group members here that could also speak to the process as advisory groups, but also in their role separate and aside from this work.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Andrew, and thank you, Barbara, for this report. This is fantastic. I'm gonna start up a couple of things. First of all, is John Frasinelli here?
Virtual.
Virtual, John? There we go.
Yes, Representative Walker, I'm here.
Thank you, sir. I just want to give you an opportunity very quickly just to say, to bring in what SDE, because you mentioned getting an annual report on the dislocated youth, at least in the school systems. Can you tell, I know we've talked before, can you just give us a little idea of it? And I would like to invite you to present to JJPOC in January on this regular report that SDE has been producing. John?
Representative Walker, thank you so much for the opportunity. I want to thank our friends at the Dalio Foundation. Certainly, Mr. Liddy and Mr. Ferguson are no strangers to the department. We've worked together in the past. There is a lot of work happening in this area, and thank you for the invitation. Commissioner Russell Tucker would like to come back at a future meeting herself to present on a number of initiatives that are happening, including the increased collection of data, annual reports on everything from chronic absenteeism to school discipline, and results of one of our initiatives called an early intervention tool, which identifies at-risk students early. So, but I want to speak specifically to one of the recommendations around chronic absenteeism, because Connecticut is really identified as a leader in this effort. This has been a priority for the commissioner for a decade, and one of the initiatives that we implemented during the pandemic, due to the increased chronic absenteeism, was something called the Learner Engagement and Attendance Program, the LEAP program. And an evaluation of that program, when we're talking about this population of students, the age 14 and up students, I can tell you that the LEAP program is a home visiting program, and to date, we've conducted over 35,000 home visits with over 17,000 students. And the data evaluated by a couple of our university partners have indicated that among the grades 6 to 12, that 6 months following the initial home visit, that attendance increased by 20 percentage points. So there is a lot of work happening in this area. As a matter of fact, there are 27 or so other states and the country of Canada who have attended our LEAP trainings to expand this program throughout the country because of its success. Statewide, I can tell you that chronic absenteeism has been declining over the last couple of years. In some of our major districts, in particular, down as much as 5.5% from the 22 to the 23 school year. And in fact, the October data from this year is indicating that those numbers are improving as well for this school year. So we have stepped up the data collection, as you mentioned, that we're collecting monthly data now. We used to collect it annually, so the monthly data allows districts to understand their numbers and look at the specificity around why students are absent to target, specific remedies for that, whether that's anxiety or whether that's family obligations or whether that's illness, that we and they can work together to target some of that. So I appreciate the opportunity to talk and look for a new social media campaign that we have called School is Better with You. A lot of opportunity for for folks to be part of that, so that students understand that we want them in school. So again, thanks for the invitation, and we look forward to providing some additional details at future meetings.
Thank you. Thank you, John. The reason why I wanted to highlight the fact that it was several different agencies independently were trying to do what they thought, and it was with your report that gave us the opportunity to actually look at what it was like to look at the data from multiple agencies. And State Department of Ed had some of this data that we've been trying to access. So with that and the coupling of all the other things that you have identified, I think we have the ability now to make the argument. I loved your economic argument. That's huge. Being able to explain to people the lost revenue, because many people are only jarred by lost revenue. We have to use whatever is in our ammunition to get people to understand the importance of these issues. So I thank you for that. And the other part that we've been struggling with is getting agencies to share their data. And we always seem to have an obstruction from the legal departments of those agencies because they're protecting the anonymity of the kids. Meanwhile, years and years go by where we have no connection with them. So all your points that you hit were spot on. I thank you for that, and I thank you for all the things that you talked about, Mr. Pelka. And if you want comments or questions, please just raise your hand or raise your hand.
Any questions from, I don't see any in the virtual room, any among members present this time? Attorney Stone?
Yeah, I just have a comment, having been on the advisory committee, because, you know, what you said is we can see it happen before it happens. And that phrase really, I think, is the call to action for this group here, right? Because if you look at the chronic absenteeism, just even take Hartford Public Schools right now, 9th grade, 10th grade, it's 42% and more right now as we speak. So we know who those kids are sitting here today, December 2023. So I'm hoping that the report doesn't just stay on the shelf, that I think some of the recommendations that we're going to be voting on later today really speak to some of your recommendations. And so I thank you for the report.
Thank you, Madam. Others, and Ms. Emitelli, Department of Labor?
Thank you. Thank you again so much for the presentation and for the information that certainly the Department of Labor has been digesting and really
I'm sorry, I just want to ask whoever speaks that we should identify who we are. Just go ahead.
Okay, yeah,
Thanks.
Lisa from the Department of Labor. So thank you again. I just wanted to highlight something that we had the opportunity to speak with you about earlier, which is that one of the advantages of having this rich resource in P20Win is that we can also develop a research agenda for the future and what we'd like to dig into more deeply. And in the past, when Measure of America did related reports, they found not only justice involvement and other factors that you've mentioned, like race and ethnicity, to be associated with increased rates of disconnection, but they also found that institutionalization of various types and disabilities were also associated with disconnection. And I'm just putting a pin in that again to remind us all that that would be something to add to the agenda going forward. Thank you again.
Thank you, Madam. Commissioner, your mic is on. Are you DCF
Yeah.
Commissioner?
Thank you. I just wanted to thank the Dalio Education Foundation for continuing to raise awareness of this issue. Thank you for coming here. Thank you for presenting to the Governor's Kids Cabinet and recognizing and lifting up just the expectation that we should all be approaching this too, as Attorney Stone talked about, from a 2-gen approach, and thinking about how parents can be empowered to help kids stay connected and less disconnected or at risk. And a lot of those risk factors speak to the ability for the parents to be supported in order for children to be able to stay academically connected and socially and civically connected. Thanks.
Thank you. Attorney Egan, that's fine. I'll get all formal. Sarah, Attorney Egan, floor is yours.
Thank you. So it's I mean, it's a great report. And I'm so appreciative of the work that you've done that collectively to really market. You know, every time I turn around, there's a meeting about the Dalio report, which is great because it's so important. And a couple of thoughts. I mean, I'm glad that, Chris, you know, you're talking about that annual look, right? Because it's about accountability, right? Collective accountability for making change. And I think that's really important for this work, you know, to articulate, well, what are the goals? I mean, you know, you described understanding the cohort, right? And deepening that understanding was really important. But I think equally important as we deepen our understanding of the needs is to identify, you know, what are the low hanging fruit goals and to begin to achieve them. So, you know, I imagine you'll have a structure for re-reporting and sort of reassessment related to that. And a couple quick thoughts. One is, you know, and related to the chronic absenteeism and sort of discipline data review that the state does and that subcommittees in this body do. You know, I think, you know, JPOC could also, through the subcommittees, there's also an opportunity to really look at the places where kids are, where there is the most chronic absenteeism. And I don't mean by district, I mean by place, right? So like within a region, there are schools, alternative education programs, state-approved special ed, state-approved private special education programs funded with public dollars that probably have astronomical rates of upwards of 70, 80% chronic absenteeism, and probably equally high exclusionary discipline rates. And I think, you know, one suggestion I would have is, you know, in partnership or part of the work we do here, really looking at those places where kids are sometimes from a younger age, a middle school age, right? To your point about prevention. And how to really tackle that sort of place by place by place. And the other comment I just wanted to make in terms of tracking going forward in terms of data sets. And I know we shared some of this with you as you were in conversation, you know, in developing the report, is the young adult fatality data. And we took a look at that 18 to 21-year-olds through our fatality review responsibilities at the Office of the Child Advocate. And the numbers were enormous for the 18 to 21-year-old for preventable, you know, young adult, older adolescent fatality, with really high rates of accidental death from overdose and really high rates of suicide, right? I think people think of the leading cause of death as being homicide, but that's not necessarily the case, right? So I think that's something to keep tracking. And I think our office maybe can help with that. And to articulate a goal to reduce prevent them. And that's the worst outcome, right? But a very costly one. And so that's my other thought going forward. But thanks so much for the work. Terrific.
Thank you. And I think Ms. Caranta's next. Maybe I'm introducing yourself if you don't mind, please. Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm Christina Quaranta. I'm the Executive Director of the Connecticut Justice Alliance. A few points you have on slide 15. I just request that if you're going to use the slide again to remove the word offender when you're referring to young people and perhaps reword that sentence. Be happy to talk about maybe other ways that young people should be referred to that are more respectful. I think too, when we're talking about the line where you have more needs to be done to re-engage the most disconnected young people who are often repeat offenders, perhaps also including and welcoming in the actual systems that are offering those young people, whether it's programs or are actually incarcerating them, saying we need to be doing more to either resource those people, which I know you mentioned, or resource the programs to really look at, is it the young people or is it the wrong intervention? Because I've kind of been going on a little tour of the state the past few weeks, talking to folks about what's working well, what's not. And a lot of people have brought up the issue of folks who are rearrested for the same crime or different ones, or have spent decades in prison and have come out and made a bad choice again, right? And so we've been talking about, is it the person or was it the intervention? And really focusing on that and not being so quick to blame the person. And I think the last piece is on the slide before that, it's 14, where we have that arrests and incarcerations are down significantly. Just, I stepped out, so I'm not sure if you said this, but just the point that yes, they're declining, but not at the same rate for Black and brown youth or young people or young adults is always an important point to make. Folks will call from around the country and say, hey, how did this happen for you? And we point out the point, well, still lots of Black and brown faces. I was just inside of a facility yesterday where that's who I was surrounded with and in conversation and community with and talking about what's working well and what's not for you. And that leads to my last question of, happy to explore with anyone in the room, and you all know this, of what are we going to do next? Because we can have the reports and the slides, but the justice advisors and I at Connecticut Justice Alliance just heard from young people yesterday in a facility about what's working well, what's not, what do they need, and what are their reentry needs when they get out and they're waiting, the clock's ticking. So happy to talk about that as soon as everyone's ready. I am. Thank you.
Thank you. And I agree with you. We do need to talk about what's working and what's not working. One of the things that we've talked about over and over again is the fact that we don't have quality assurance in all of our agencies to evaluate the systems that we are paying for and the opportunities that are we paying for. We need to put those back in place in all of our agencies that are serving our children now. What we've found is that a lot of the programs, as Christina pointed out, they're being put into programs, not necessarily because that is the program for them, but that might be the program available. And so we are not doing a good job of looking at what do we offer, and is that the trend that needs to be addressed. Many kids, I think one question that we should ask all kids on the day one after when they start school is, when you leave here, what do you do? We have to be conscious of the fact that there are so many open areas that allow them free rein without any direction or opportunity to grow. We put them out of school, if they're in school, and then they say they come back the next day or whatever, but we don't know what happens from that point. So becoming more connected to our kids and asking them, I think, is important. But I think all of us are ready to make those movements and decisions, but we have to all realize that the movements and decisions have to be very carefully monitored so that we don't ignore the things that we have seen in our individual communities, and also because we may not be addressing it to the right people. So I'm hoping that that's going to be a major thing this year in talking about contracting and talking about evaluation. If I'm contracted to serve 10 children, what am I going to do with those 10 children? And how do I demonstrate that it is beneficial for those 10 children? We've got to be clear, because we seem to sometimes just support the same agencies over and over again and not necessarily get the results that we want to get. So with the questions, Mark?
I always, when Rep. Walker gets those moments in these meetings and shares that wisdom and thoughtfulness, I think I never want to go next. So why am I endeavoring to speak next? But Mr. Liddy, thank you very much for your presentation and your colleagues from Dalio. I was going to mention trying to build somewhat. I don't think I want to go so far as to say I'm trying to connect to what Christina was raising. But I'm going to strive to touch on something she raised, which was a desire to see connection. You know, how do we connect what's recommended in your report to the work of this committee? And 3 things came to mind, that some of which are referenced in the report, but I wonder if I could just flag them and see if you have any thoughts now on whether it is covered or alluded to, just things that we've been focusing on in this committee. And number 1 is the DCF has created an education unit led by Dr. Worthy, who's here in the audience. And that was a result of the work done by Representative Porter and Attorney Vatner in the Education Committee regarding youth and out-of-home placement, be they in the Department of Correction, be they in the judicial branch or some other means, of fear that their credits would not, the accumulation of additional credits would not follow them, or there would be an interruption, we would lose them somehow. So we've been trying very hard through the doctor's work to draw those connections so we don't lose sight of those young people. And I'm wondering, for the youth facing many challenges, that's an emerging model we can build upon, or what more we can do with that infrastructure in DCF. Number two was Representative Walker has been working very hard on the diversion system, juvenile review boards, youth service bureaus. We're lucky to have Erica Bromley here, but Rep Walker has been really leading the way and supporting additional resources for referral options for young people who come into contact with school, with police, with community, or in some other means, and is not appropriate for a juvenile justice system referral, but could be connected swiftly with programs, assessment, and can actually help them get back on track and support their needs. And then number three is around Region Secure. You know, in Hamden, I had the privilege of visiting that facility and seeing really a reflection of the work of this committee to create closer to home, smaller, secure facilities for young people who have received a adjudication from the juvenile court, and as part of that are placed in such a secure facility. And I really looked in there and saw what was a vision. We received a presentation, however, really identifying the challenges. We've done the right thing in prioritizing youth who have very serious risks and needs. We're not placing low-risk kids into those facilities. These are youth whose behavior has reached a point where they need an intensive intervention. The challenge posed to the committee is, how do we strengthen the reentry side when they transition back to the community? And I just was wondering if any of those three, you know, are alluded to or covered, or if, you know, to any, regardless, it'd be great to keep in touch in the future about these ongoing priorities of the committee and how we can work collaboratively. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Undersecretary. Certainly, I think the connections that you've just highlighted are critical. The report does call out several exemplars or ways and things and programs that are already happening in the state that are working in service of this population. I think, to your point, it's really important for you all to highlight that and to identify which programs are working, what impact they're having. You know, in terms of the transferring of records and all of that, BCG interviewed over 100 stakeholders throughout the state as part of this report, in addition to analyzing the quantitative data. And so certainly there are themes that emerged from that, including the importance of connectivity between agencies like DCF and SDE and local boards of education. We had the privilege of, separate and aside from this report, visiting some programs where, like the Bridge program out in Hamden, right? And really understanding what are the nuances of a young person who is engaged with, or who the justice system is involved with. What is that pathway from them stepping down back into their community, and what are the critical needs of that young person to ensure that their needs are tracked in each system that they're touching. So with regards to the DCF education unit, Commissioner Durantes and I, we've had conversations about that, which is exciting to see that there's intentionality around this. And I think that's the other piece here, is the intentionality. The Regions program certainly is an area of further exploration and inquiry about how to replicate that and bolster that type of program. We aren't in a position at Dalio Education to recommend statewide policy or programs. What we've done is really try to understand who this population is, where they're living, what their needs are, so that others can use that data to inform exactly what you're talking about, programs, policies, et cetera.
Thank you, sir, very much. And just my final thought is we were lucky to have Scott Gall present on P20 WIN at the last meeting. I wanted to thank DOC and Judicial for joining. I think joining Mr. Glenn. Yes, sir.
Chris, thank you. And thank you for the presentation. When I think about this committee, we've embraced sort of a results-based accountability model for most of what we do, but we've always struggled in really getting to that ultimate accountability of what happens to youth post this system, whether it's the educational or this. And I think this report is the first time it really takes a look at to say whether or not we are successful, because it's looking at, are you engaged? Are you a productive citizen? And so I think this is the basis of measuring the work that we do and holding ourselves accountable. And I think, Chris, you alluded to it. One of the recommendations is that this should be repeated. We have to know whether or not, we're making progress. The difficult thing about this report and the way that this body and others work is that it's longitudinal. We're not looking at a 2-year budget cycle or what we can fund today or what needs to be funded, but rather have we been successful and are the policies there? OPM does an amazing job in predicting sort of prison populations using all sorts of statistical analysis. And this is a similar tool to really thinking about what's going to happen in the future. And as Martha pointed out, even with LEAP and even with some of the successes with SDE, there are definitely pockets of struggle. If you're thinking about 40% of a school that is chronically absent, that's not an outlier. It's normative. And so that's the call to action for today. The accountability for ourselves is the report. And I want to just thank you guys for taking the time to do it.
Sorry, Attorney Batner, mind introducing yourself before you speak, ma'am? Thank you.
Thanks so much, Amy Batner with Education Work Group. Just a quick question about how long it took Boston Consulting Group to do the work and produce this report. And also, if you could just comment on your selection of Boston Consulting Group and if they have done similar types of studies for other states. Thanks so much.
Thank you for the question. So the time frame for this report, it took about 1 year to produce. Part of that is because of the magnitude of data and the request that we had. This report took over 520,000 records of young people, high school students between 2014 and 2022, and looked at their connection to all of those other agencies that were listed. And so the process of developing the data sharing agreements and the MOUs and really understanding what it was we were asking for, what the agencies could provide, took some time, to be honest. And we're grateful for P20 WIN and their endurance in responding to this request and processing the request. But there certainly are speed bumps along the way. Once the data was secured, certainly BCG went off with the support of the advisory group and independently really looked at the data and tried to understand what that was telling them. And so that took some time. 1 year, I think, from start to finish is probably where we landed. Your other questions, we did go out competitively for this report. So we did have a competitive process that we looked at proposals, but I can't speak beyond that.
Any further questions or comments? Don't see any in the chat. I think that's a really good discussion. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
For their presentation today.
Don't be strangers.
Please don't. Agreed. Yep. We turn it back to you, Erica, to begin the next transition.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. The next round of, and we have a very short period of time, so I think we'll have to stage this and continue the conversation in January, if that is okay with the chairs. But I think what we can do is bring forward 2 recommendations, at least for today. Or just one? Okay, just one. A recommendation for today. And then there is a process, and we'll go through this very quickly. I do have my staff here who are going to do a roll call you by name. Please speak loudly into the mic. Please make sure that if you are virtual and you are a voting member, to please also turn on your camera and speak to the mic, and so that we can record your vote. We do have a quorum. Is that correct, Brittany? Yes, we do have a quorum here. Each JJPOC member has 1 vote. on the recommendation. I'm just going to briefly, you see it in your PowerPoint, so I'm only not going to read the whole thing. That our staff will do the roll call and announce the committee members' names. And if there is, please, if there's somebody who's absent, but you are a designee, please also make sure that you are identifying yourself. And then for committee members joining in person, okay, we will, like as said, yay, nay, abstain, that's for both in person and virtually. We will begin. The first, I think probably the first recommendation that we should do if we can get, should go pretty quickly. And I want to thank Representative Gilchrist and the new appointed Dr. Singh and the work group that came together very quickly after this approval of this committee to put forth a recommendation to move a work group together to look at gender responsive services for individuals who identify as females. And the first recommendation is on the gender responsive work group, and I'm going to give the floor to Representative Gilchrist.
Great, thank you so much. So responding to gender responsiveness is not new in the country and in Connecticut. For over 2 decades, the federal government has recognized there's a need to respond to girls' unique delinquency-related needs. And Connecticut actually has been recognized as a champion nationally in this work. So we're not planning to recreate the wheel. But what we do know to be true is that there's a lot of research that shows that evidence-based program models are male-dominated. We know that adolescent girls experience trauma and respond to it differently. There's an increased number of both gender nonconforming girls who identify as LGBTQ+ or other identities. And so what I'm very pleased to be a part, and thank you to the JJPOC for giving me this opportunity. This work group brings together folks who are in the space now and have been in this space for well over a decade. And so it's bringing a lot of institutional knowledge and new knowledge to the table. And so the recommendations you have before you really begin to outline what this working group will do, since we're very new to the JJPOC. And so we also want to ensure, I have the opportunity to also serve in the Trafficking in Persons Council. And so we want to ensure that those two entities are working together because there is a lot of overlap with this population. And so the recommendations you have before you really look to establish our working group and then ensure that we are collaborating effectively. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions from the group here or virtual? Don't see any questions here live, and I'm going to just check the chat. Minimize the window. No, I don't see any there either. I think we ready to, I don't think we need to do anything formal before call for a vote.
No, I think what will happen is Paul will call the, your name for a vote, and you are to either yay, nay, or abstain.
That's correct. So the vote will be in person. If you're in person, you will turn your mic on and vote yay, nay, or abstain. If you are virtual, please turn your screen on, turn your mic on, and vote the same way as well. So I'll begin here. I'll be calling your first and last name, and please turn your mic on and respond to us. Tony Walker.
Tony Walker votes in the affirmative.
Mark Pelka.
Yes.
Anthony Nolan.
Nolan in the affirmative.
Martin Looney. Martin Looney. George Cabrera. Gary Winfield. Gary Winfield. Steven Staffstrom. Steven Staffstrom. Christina Quaranta.
Quaranta, yes.
John Kissel. John Kissel. Craig Fishbein. Craig Fishbein. DC Marr.
CC
Eric-
Mars, yes. Sorry. Hang on.
Gotta be live.
Yep, wait a sec. There we go. CC Mars, yes.
Thank you, Cece. Liz Linehan. Liz Linehan, Bia Montanez, Lisa Seminara, Macklin Roman,
Macklin Roman, yes.
Ann Dufanis, Patrick Callahan, Matt Lesser, Hector Glynn,
Hector Glenn, yes.
Jillian Gilchrist,
Jillian Gilchrist, yes.
Lisa Seminara.
This is Sean Cleary, Lisa's appointee, voting yes.
Thank you, Sean. Jay Case, Martha Stone,
Martha Stone, yes.
Catherine Austin, Bernetta Henry, Robin Porter,
Robin Porter votes in the affirmative.
Eric Berthel, Tammy Nucio, Greg Howard, Elizabeth Bizzuto,
Elizabeth Bizzuto, yes.
Richard Robinson, Tammy Nguyen O'Dowd,
Tammy Wynn O'Dowd, yes.
Gary Roberge,
Gary Roberge, yes.
Ty Erickson,
yes.
Deshaun Bowden Lewis,
If
Renee-
she's, yeah, if she's not on,
you.
historically, this position has been her designee, so Attorney Renee Semino will vote yes.
Thank you. Patrick Griffin,
Travis Walcott as Patrick Griffin's designee and vote yes.
thank you. Vanessa Durantes,
Durantes, yes.
Angel Quiros,
Eulalia Garcia, designee for Commissioner Quiros, voting yes.
Charlene Russell Tucker, Charles Hughes,
Yes.
Nancy Navarrete, Amy Maricino,
Amy Maricino voting yes.
Dante Bartholomew, Lisa Sementilli,
Yes.
Andrea Barton Reeves,
Talitha Coggins, designee for Commissioner Andrea Barton Reeves, voting yes.
thank you, Talitha.
You're welcome.
Manisha Juthani,
This is Miriam Miller, Commissioner Jutani's designee. I vote yes.
thank you, Miriam. Neil Dreif, Josh Bernager, Fernando Spagnolo, Baron Bollier,
Baron Bollier voting yes.
Derek Gordon,
Derek Gordon voting yes.
Vincent Candelora,
Designee Steve Abagnaro voting yes for Vincent Candelar.
thank you, Stephen. Kevin Kelly, Gwendolyn Samuel, Sarah Egan,
Sarah Egan voting yes.
Natasha Pierre, Ray Dancy,
Ray Dancy, yes.
Connie Cooper Smith. Connie Cooper Smith. Betty Ann McDonald.
Betty Ann McDonald, voting yes.
Thank you. This concludes the vote for the gender responsive work group.
Thank you. Unfortunately, due to the time, we're going to probably have to transfer the rest of the votes into the January meeting because we have to stick to the timeline. So I thank everybody for the opportunities today to talk. I hope that some of the things that we talked about, that we can continue those conversations in the forums that we have. I'm a little disappointed, but I think we needed to have the meeting with the Dahlia group about their reports. Are there any comments or questions? Okay, with that, everybody have a good holiday, and we look forward to starting back fresh in January. Have a good day. Bye-bye.